4th of July, Rolf Harris was jailed for 5 years and 9 months after being found guilty of 12 indecent assaults against 4 girls, including one aged just 7 or 8.
Last weekend, Vanessa Feltz revealed that she too had been a victim of Rolf Harris. Vanessa, who is currently on air presenting her radio show, joined us exclusively yesterday to tell us why she went public and about the abuse and backlash she received online as a result. Vanessa, thank you for speaking to us today. You kept this quiet for 18 years. What made you speak up?
The police asked me to. I kept it quiet because when it happened 18 years ago live on the telly, it didn't seem to me to be enough of a big deal to make a great big fuss about it. I was absolutely fine. I was a 36-year-old woman. I was live on telly. You know, I felt Rolf Harris's hand creeping up under my dress and then in the direction of my underwear and then just under the rim of the elastic. And in the nick of time, I threw to a commercial break and jumped off.
Let's just because you rushed there through what is now, in hindsight, a really very serious incident. You are live on the TV.
Yeah.
You're doing Big Breakfast. It's, what year is it? 1996?
96, yes.
So you are lying on the bed, because everyone was interviewed, lots of people interviewed, I was interviewed on that bed. And so his wife was in the studio?
His wife, I could see her, she was just a few feet away, yes.
OK, so you're lying there, and where was the shot? You couldn't, what could you see?
You could see probably from my knees up, I suppose. I was wearing a long dress, a long beaded gown. And
was he someone that you had looked forward to meeting?
Absolutely, really looked forward to meeting him. I thought he was great. My sister and I used to sing Two Little Boys and Jake the Peg, and I thought he was fabulous. And actually, he was a great person to interview because he's very entertaining, he's got a lot to say for himself, and it was all going swimmingly well.
But when you came in that morning, even before you'd met him, you came in and you sort of said, you know, he was a childhood hero of mine. The girls in the makeup room, you sort of all talking about him, they sort of gave you a little bit of a warning about the type of guy that he was known to be.
They said to me, watch out, Vanessa, he's got terrible wandering hands. And, you know, it's so interesting what I thought, because I remember my reaction so clearly, and ironically, it all kind of has played itself out since, because I thought, well, A, it's Rolf Harris, that can't be true, and B, even if he has, he wouldn't want to do it with me. You know, I'm a really large lady. In those days, I was a good size 20-odd. I thought, oh, I'm sure he wouldn't try it on with me. I'm sure he wouldn't fancy me, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to.
Did you not sort of, when it was actually happening, even just the sort of surprise of it happening, how did you manage not to react at all?
I tried very hard not to show in my face what was going on. I also tried to sort of have a look over without it being obvious to kind of see what in the hell was going on, because I could feel the fabric. I was wearing a long dress, and I could feel it being scrunched up and slightly hear it because it was beaded, the dress, and you could sort of hear the fabric rustling up. Then I felt his hand on my leg. I thought, blimey, you know, goodness me. And then it was going further and further up, and it's a kind of mixture of panic and shock
and
disbelief. Absolutely, my goodness, it's Rolf Harris. And in fact, in one of the pictures of that event that came out in the papers, which I haven't seen, I've never seen it before in my life, you can see my hand on his hand. I'm kind of like that in the picture, in the photograph. Anyway, I thought, God, what shall I do? Because I realised if I sat completely still,
it would continue.
Pretty much inevitable.
Why not out him on air and go, you're on the telly, you get off, what are you doing?
Because his wife was right there, and as far as I was concerned, he was happily married. I thought I didn't want to upset his wife and kind of make her feel humiliated or anything like that. It was a programme watched by lots and lots of children. I didn't want children to know about some man with his hand on my thigh. I didn't think it was appropriate to say anything.
Do you think that was part of his power, in a way, that was his control, that he was fully aware that actually, strangely, in this public situation, it gave him a safety net in order to be able to behave like that?
Yes, I think he really, really must have loved the fact that he had complete control, and he knew that there was no way I could say anything. I couldn't say a word. Now, when it was over, I mean, I did hop off in the nick of time.
Well, you threw to a commercial break.
Yes.
And anyone who sort of watches telly, knows telly, you'd understand that they're pretty scheduled, more or less, sometimes a bit flexible, but you throw to an unscheduled commercial break, it throws everyone into chaos.
Yes.
No one's ready for it. So how did you explain that you'd thrown to this unscheduled commercial break?
Well, I assume that the viewers wouldn't know it was unscheduled.
But what about those in the studio?
Well, the people literally in the room with me, I mean, they knew perfectly well what was happening.
So they could see what was going on?
Yes, they could see, and they understood. And also, I hopped off as quickly as I possibly could, got off the bed, stood up, thought, God, good. And then I looked at his face to see whether he was looking worried, you know, that I might say something since his wife was just there, or nervous, embarrassed, angry. Nothing. just completely smiling, you know, as if nothing at all had happened. It was very, very unnerving, the
And you
whole
had
thing.
to continue the interview after the break, though, so you had to get back on the bed with this man who had just assaulted you. Did nobody say anything or step in?
No one said anything, and I didn't say anything. And then it was over, and then I went home. And I mean, I told my then husband, I told my sister, told a couple of friends, I suppose. All of them said the same thing. Oh, Rolf Harris, are you sure? Really? Blimey.
No thought of, and it's easy once again to say this in retrospect, when you think of ourselves in your situation and the big star that he was, no thought of going to the police?
None at all, because what had really happened to me, would I have gone to the police and said, you know, Rolf Harris's hand reached the top of my thigh and just inside the rim of my... I mean, what was there to say? I was absolutely fine. I was fine. I didn't... you know, my life wasn't ruined. I wasn't traumatised. I slept fine that night. There was nothing to say. Plus, as I said, he was happily married, at least as far as I could see. He was incredibly famous, and I had absolutely no idea that he'd done anything like that to anyone else. If somebody said to me, my gosh, he's doing that to 7-year-old girls and teenagers and God knows what, that would have been totally different. But I had no idea that that was happening. And you know, imagine if I'd strolled into the police station and said, Rolf Harris put his hand on my thigh. What are they going to say? I mean, you know.
Well, that's the problem, I guess. That's what everybody thought collectively,
I think
and that's why it managed to go on for so long. During the trial, you knew that the other victims, his victims, were telling the truth because their stories were, although not on the telly, were very similar. This kind of very public abuse.
It's the first time I've heard the phrase hiding in plain sight. I'd never heard this before, but doing something that normally you would think would be very furtive and hidden and, you know, come here, little girl, come round the back of the bike sheds kind of thing, but actually not, doing something in full view of other people. I mean, this was obviously his particular preference.
What has been extraordinary, and I think what has had quite a profound effect on you, is the reaction to your discussion of a convicted abuser.
I mean, it was suggested to me that it would be a good idea for me to tell the story, as I didn't get a chance to say it in court, just so that people would be encouraged to come forward if they'd, you know, been abused or harassed sexually or inappropriately touched, and also that they would realise that, you know, if it can happen to someone in the public eye, if it can happen on live TV, you know, it can happen to pretty much anyone, and therefore you don't need to be ashamed if it's happened to you. It's such a, unfortunately, such a sort of common thing to happen. So I didn't think twice. I just thought, well, you know, he's been found guilty on all 12 counts. People would like me to tell the story, I'll tell it.
And what was the response that you got?
My gosh, the response has been absolutely... It's so appalling. It makes you question, you know, your faith in human nature, really, because I mean, I have been called absolutely everything, it seems, on Twitter, from a C word to a whore. People have said that they can't believe it could be true, that they've lost all faith in Rolf Harris's judgment, that he could dream of molesting someone as physically repulsive as Vanessa Feltz, how ugly and revolting I am, how, you know... I mean, it's just horrid, and I'm so lucky that I don't actually, I don't go online. I don't even have one of those grown-up phones, or, you know, I've never sent an email in my life, and thank goodness it's kind of protected me from at least some of it, because, I mean, I certainly, you know, didn't anticipate it, and I'm shocked by it, really.
Well, there were people who were accusing you that you were out to make money out of the back of it.
Well, I wasn't. I didn't sell the story. I wouldn't have dreamt of it. I haven't made a penny, and why would you want to make money out of something as horrible as that? That's completely untrue, and I had no motivation other than it was suggested to me that it would be a good thing to do. That was it.
Does it make you worry that if somebody like yourself, who's in the public eye, you know, very confident, can speak out, all of those sorts of things, if you get that sort of abuse for coming forward, what it does to somebody who's a lot more vulnerable than yourself?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And you know, one of the greatest fears that people who've been abused sexually have is that people won't believe them, or even worse, that they'll be castigated, that they'll be blamed, that it'll turn in on them, that it'll be said that they did something to provoke it, or that they're not good looking enough to deserve it. You know, all these malicious and unkind and horrible things. And really, you know, look, I'm fine. I'm a grown up. I'm 52 years old. Luckily, I haven't read much of it, and I can take it, you know, and also I've had quite a few years of being pretty roundly castigated in the press for being fat or being unattractive, or whatever people think.
Take it, whether you can or not. Of course you shouldn't have to take it, but you know, we're all in the real world, and I'm fine, really. A little bit upset. You can see my feathers a bit ruffled, but I'll be fine. But imagine if I was 17. Imagine if it had been my first day, let's say, as a makeup artist on that programme, and he'd done that to me. Imagine if it was any of the terrible things that he did, or all the other people who behave like that have done. I think it's a terrible shame, really, that I tell a story
story about a convicted abuser, and I met with a torrent of abuse. It just means I just don't understand what people who tweet that kind of thing are thinking of.
What do you say to anyone who is watching this and who is going through that? I mean, they will listen to this story and think, oh, I don't know whether it's worth that.
Well, I say that I hope that what they tell people, and they should come forward and tell, will be taken very seriously, that the person that they speak to will be gentle and kind and compassionate and understanding. And I also hope that because they're not in the public eye, as I seem to be, they won't receive the level of abuse and a tirade of nastiness as I have done. I mean, they'll keep it quiet and they'll tell only the people who need to know. And I do hope this doesn't put people off coming forward, and that it does the opposite thing. And I must say, I have also received an enormous amount of support. Plus, I've heard from all kinds of people, the most unlikely people, in my own personal phone, you know, texting me, and emails to my work and stuff like that, saying, one person saying, you know, this happened to me 23 years ago. Wasn't from a famous person, but someone that they knew. They were going to go to the police. Someone phoned my producer on the radio, sobbing, saying, you know, I'm actually going to tell the story. I've never told it before. I've had loads of calls live on my programme. I mean, you know,
so something
luckily,
good has come
yes,
out
it
of
hasn't. And I've heard from various charities as well saying that it has made a difference. So that was all I was hoping to do, and I hope it has.
Well, let's hope that's what people
Thank you,
remember.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
Oh, nice to see
Thank
you.
you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Well, that was Vanessa Feltz speaking to us yesterday. We put Vanessa's allegations to Rolf Harris's representatives and they have not commented. We'd also like to make it clear that Vanessa was not paid for that interview and instead requested her fee was donated to the National Association for People Abused in Childhood.
All right, Jeff, what comments have you got coming in?
Well, I think we've got a mixed bag, really, Holly. Leanne says, I think Vanessa should have spoken out sooner. Sue, it's so easy to say she should have come forward sooner. I expect it's a whole different ball game when you're actually the victim of that crime. Donna says the backlash that Vanessa has received is totally uncalled for and is more likely to put off other victims from coming forward. People do not realise or are ignorant to the fact that the effects of abuse stays with you for life. Thank you very much for your comments on that, everybody, and keep them coming in for everything else on the show. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, if you've been affected by anything we discuss with Vanessa or you need help or advice on any of the issues raised, then please have a look at our website.
Do what you've got to do. Vanessa, I'm going to come to you on this, if you don't mind, because I know you've got your own personal experience here. But Rolf Harris, disgraced, convicted sex offender, died at the age of 93.
Yes.
You've experienced the side of Rolf Harris that we've learnt about over the last few years, haven't you?
Yes, I did. This was way back in 1996, where, I mean, I was born in 1962. My whole generation grew up worshipping Rolf Harris. We adored him. We thought he was funny. We loved the songs, Timey Kangaroo Down Sport, Jake the Peg. We knew them all. Didgeridoo. You know, Can You See What It Is Yet? He would have these shows every week on telly, and he had this lovely dancing troupe called The Young Generation, and we just loved him. Absolutely loved him. The Queen loved him. Princess Anne loved him. The whole country loved him. And so when I used to be on the Big Breakfast bed, at first it was Paula Yates and then Lily Savage and then it was me. And when they said, Rolf Harris is your guest today, I'm like, yay, this is great. You know, Rolf, we love him. This is fantastic. And we got on the bed to do the interview. It's a very, very small, it used to be a very small little room with a cameraman there. Rolf's wife was just standing there. And we go live, we're live on TV, and I was wearing, as you could probably see in that picture, a long beaded dress, because the idea was I'd wear an evening gown in the mornings on this programme, you see. And as I'm talking to Rolf, I can hear my dress scrunching, all the beads being scrunched up, as he started to grab the bottom of my dress and move it further and further and further and further and further up, with his wife literally about maximum 2 feet away. And I was live on TV. I just didn't know what to do because.
And was that seen on TV? You could actually see him doing
I think you could see it if you're watching it, but maybe not. Maybe the camera was on our faces and you couldn't see maybe what was going on sort of down below. But I was absolutely shocked because it's Rolf Harris, for goodness sake, that we all adored. And also it's live on telly. And also it's a daytime, lovely show with lots of kids watching. So and also his wife's there. So I couldn't say, get your hand off my leg or stop touching me or go like that to him. How could I in the middle of a live interview?
Yeah.
And of course, he knew that. He knew that he was doing it to me in those circumstances where I couldn't do anything. So in the end, I took a cushion and sort of tried to put it between us. That didn't make any difference. And the hand kept going up and up and up.
This is terrible.
I know, but it's shocking, isn't it? And it just went up and up and up and up and up. It got to the point where if I didn't do something, it was going to go literally inside my underwear. but down below. And
I'm
obviously...
so sorry you went through this. This is awful.
Well,
This is assault.
I just didn't know. I don't know what you would have done, but I did what TV presenters are not really allowed to do, which is suddenly throw to a break, which you can't, you know, if anybody knows how telly works, you've got to wait for the director to say time for the break. You don't just choose when to go to a break. But if you watch the footage, you can see me go kind of like that, and then I say something like, well, I think what we'll do now is, I think we'll go to a break. And we went to a break, and then I jumped off the bed. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. For all I knew, I was the only person that had ever happened to. I didn't know, and nobody had ever said a bad word about him in front of me. I'd never heard. And also, his wife was there. I didn't want to upset his wife and maybe, you know, do something to damage a marriage, or why, you know, I didn't know what to do. And then, when the adverts were over, I just got back on the bed and so did he, and we just finished the interview.
Oh, Vanessa.
A, did no one spot anything? B, did you say it to anyone afterwards? C, did anyone take any action afterwards?
No, I just told my then husband, I think maybe one of my friends, didn't tell anyone, didn't want to make any trouble, and I thought it was a one-off anyway, I didn't know. And then years and years later, in 2013, the police came to my house because they'd got the footage. And they, yeah.
That's horrible.
I know, but I was fine.
So sorry you went through that.
No, but I was fine. I was grown up. I was married. I wasn't a child.
Doesn't matter. You should never have been put into that situation ever.
That's what hiding in plain sight is,
That's
isn't it?
it, isn't
That's
it?
what hiding in plain sight is, and that's what he did.
And you covered the trial.
I covered the trial and sat there and listened to everything that this man did to prepubescent little girls, friends of his family, and it's despicable. It's. I mean, honestly, I hope he rots in hell.
I can't tell you the number of famous women, I won't say their names, obviously, because none of them came forward, but who said to me, oh, my God, it happened to me, it happened to me, it happened to me. And also a couple of teenagers I happen to know who said they were queuing for an ice cream at a premiere show in a theatre, and Rolf and his wife were standing in front, and suddenly they felt this hand coming from, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it was pretty much all the time.
The lifetime of damage done to victims of child sexual abuse, and he knows what he's doing, and he's
He even made
children.
anti-paedophile films. Children just say no, that kind of thing.
Did anyone ever ask the question, how did it continue for so long? Well, during his trial, after his trial, was it?
I think certainly during the trial, lots of questions were asked about how was this allowed to happen. But this is, particularly in the trial stage, these were young children, you know, who. What are you meant to do, aged 8?
Yes, what can you do?
And the judge in the sentencing said at the end, you know, Rolf Harris, you have shown no remorse. So having done the things that he did, having spent a career hiding in plain sight with adults, you know, rot in hell.
I think there are definitely sort of Jimmy Savile parallels in terms of somebody so loved, so associated with children, you know, the friend of the royal family, you know, just gets excellent box office, people love to watch him, people love him. So if it happens to you, you can't quite believe it. You can't, you say, hang on, what?
It's unbelievable.
Is it quite shocking, you know, quite a shocking thing?
Can I ask you, Vanessa, how did you feel when you heard the news he passed away?
Well, I'm Jewish and I come from a kind of background where, you know, you try to forgive. So I didn't feel any sort of... I felt a very old man has passed away, and I hope that nobody gets a chance to behave like that again. I suppose that's what I felt. I don't feel any sense of...
Well, he can't do any more harm now,
No.
can he? Which is a good thing.
Well, that's serious strength from you.
Yeah.
So fair play to you.
Yeah, forgiveness is
Sorry
the
you
thing,
had to
isn't
go
it?
through that.
I was okay. I was a grown-up and I could deal with it. Definitely hasn't ruined my life or anything, but it was a very amazing thing for somebody to do on live TV, wasn't it?
Thank you for sharing it, though.
okay.
Thank you
Thanks
for
so
sharing
much.
that story, Vanessa.
All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Cheers, Tom.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks so much. Right, still loads more to come on This Morning after this short break.